I was fighting for my life in the ICU when the doctor warned. Tonight might be his last. But my father said, we can't come. Your half-brother's gala is more important. When they finally arrived, they found only an empty bed and my letter. Their faces went pale as they read it. The last thing I needed that night was a phone call from Marvin. I was hunched over the drafting table in our little corner of the warehouse, sweat clinging to my collar, pencil smudges across half my palm. The prototype deadline was 3 weeks out, and we still hadn't solved the torque transfer issue in the rear axle. I wasn't even supposed to be here this late, but I'd volunteered anyway. That's what you do when your company's bleeding investors and your job's hanging by a thread. Then my phone buzzed. Private number. I didn't answer right away. The last time I picked up an unknown call at work, it was a debt collector for Marvin. Again, but something told me to press that green icon, and when I did, the voice on the other end greeted me like nothing had changed. Raymond, my boy, it's your dear old dad. My stomach twisted. I hadn't heard from him in almost 6 months. What do you want? I asked flatly, not even bothering with hello. Oh, come on now. That's no way to greet your father. I have news. Good news. I leaned back, wiped my forehead with the back of my sleeve. Let me guess. You need money. He laughed, deep and theatrical, like he was on stage. Not need. Think of it more like a contribution, a legacy-building investment. I sighed. I already paid the deposit on the venue. Yes, and it's magnificent. Raymond, the lighting tech said he worked with Sondheim. Did I tell you that? And the caterer? You've got such a good eye. The shrimp canapes are divine. Simon's friends are going to be. I cut him off. You said this was for your retirement, Marvin. One last hurrah. But everything you've picked has Simon's name written all over it. There was a pause. Just a second too long. Then, Raymond, this is about passing the torch. I want Simon to shine. He's got potential. Then let him shine with his own damn money. Raymond, he said, voice dropping into that well-rehearsed sadness he used whenever he wanted something. Don't do this. I gave you life, and now you can't even give me this small gesture? I'm an old man, for God's sake. You know what people will say if this flops? After all I've done. You mean like taking out a loan in my name without telling me? Or letting Simon crash in my apartment for 6 months and leave with my MacBook? That's ancient history, he said, instantly defensive. Yeah, well, some of us are still paying for it. There was silence. Then came the dagger. You've always been ungrateful, even as a kid. Simon understands the value of family. He doesn't make me beg. My jaw clenched. Maybe because you never asked him to sacrifice anything. The call ended not long after. No thanks. No apology. Just a quiet click as he hung up. I stood there in the dark warehouse, phone still in my hand, feeling like a cracked shell, empty, fragile, but still somehow standing. I'd spent years pretending his calls didn't gut me, that I didn't care. But I did, and Marvin knew it. I couldn't sleep that night. Even after the phone call ended and I'd driven home in silence, headlights blurring past me on the freeway, I just lay there on my couch staring at the ceiling. My body ached from leaning over the drafting table all day, and my mind, it just wouldn't quit. I kept hearing Marvin's voice. That same melodramatic lilt he used back when I was a kid and he'd miss my birthday for a community theater performance. I'm building something bigger than myself, Raymond. You'll understand when you're older. I did understand. Eventually. It just wasn't the lesson he thought he was teaching. I sat up, walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water. My apartment was small, too small for a grown man to be living in, if you asked Marvin, but it was mine. No roommates. No unpaid debts. Just cracked tile and peace. It wasn't just this gala. It was all the years leading up to it. I was 20 when Marvin called me in tears because the bank was about to repossess his Honda. I drained my college savings to cover the payments. Never got that money back. Never went to grad school either. I was 26 when Simon got into that arts conservatory in Chicago. Marvin said the scholarship didn't cover housing. Come on, Ray, he'd said. You know what it's like to dream and have no means. I paid the deposit on the dorm. Simon lasted a semester. By the time I turned 30, I'd given up on the idea of owning a house before 40. My credit was decent, but my savings kept disappearing every time Marvin had another emergency. The roof, the dentist. That time he wanted to invest in Simon's directorial debut, which ended up being a one-night black box showcase with 6 folding chairs and a fog machine. I opened my drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope I'd been saving. Inside was the last $500 in cash Marvin had begged for just to cover the prop upgrades for this very gala. I'd hand-delivered it 2 weeks ago after he said the event would fall apart without it. He didn't even say thank you, just complained that the fog machine didn't have a timer. That night I sat in my car outside his place for nearly 20 minutes after dropping it off, thinking about the years. About all the birthdays I missed because I was covering rent for him or Simon. About the 3 girlfriends who'd told me nicely that they couldn't date someone who was always bailing out his father. About the time I told Marvin I'd gotten promoted, and he asked if that meant I could finally cover his health insurance. I drove with that envelope in my lap now, my hands clenched on the steering wheel. The fog had rolled in thick, just my luck. Streetlights blurred, the white line disappearing ahead of me. I wasn't even sure why I was out. Habit, maybe. Or maybe I just needed to move, to feel like I was going somewhere. I didn't see the curve until it was too late. The wheels skidded, a flash of guardrail, a crunch of metal, then nothing. When I opened my eyes again, everything was sideways. The windshield spiderwebbed, airbag deflated across my chest, the taste of blood in my mouth. I tried to move, and pain exploded through my ribs. I couldn't even reach my phone. I lay there in the crumpled mess of my little sedan, that stupid envelope still wedged between the seats, and all I could think was, how the hell did I get here? Not just the crash, but all of it. Years of being the backup plan, the silent donor, the reliable disappointment, and now here I was, bleeding in the dark, with no one to call. When I came to, everything was white, not heaven, just fluorescent hospital light, harsh and clinical. I blinked up at a ceiling I didn't recognize, my head heavy, every breath sharp like someone had stuffed broken glass under my ribs. Hey, don't try to move. A nurse's voice, calm, steady. A woman leaned into view, dark curly hair pulled back, tired eyes with a kindness behind them. I'm Ellen, she said, checking something on the monitor beside me. You're in the ICU. You've been unconscious for a while. What happened? I croaked. My throat felt like sandpaper. Car accident, she said gently. You swerved off the road in heavy fog. EMTs said it looked like you blacked out before the impact. You're lucky. Broken ribs, fractured hip, concussion, but you're alive. I didn't feel lucky. Ellen gave me a sip of water from a straw and adjusted my blankets. Do you remember anything? I nodded, wincing. The curve, the rail, the silence. Okay, she said, scribbling a note. We've been trying to reach your emergency contact. The number you listed for your father isn't working. We tried the backup number, but it just rings. Of course it does. He's throwing a party, I muttered. Ellen tilted her head. Excuse me. I coughed once, the pain shooting down my side. He's at a gala. Retirement thing. Said it was his last big performance. She looked genuinely confused. We told him you might not survive the night. My eyes drifted toward the window, but all I saw was my reflection in the glass. Pale, swollen, tired. Eventually, another nurse wheeled in a landline phone on a rolling cart. We got through, she said. He's on the line. I didn't want to hear it, but I nodded. The phone was placed gently near my ear. I didn't speak first. Hello, came Marvin's voice, distant and annoyed. I could hear music, chatter, clinking glasses in the background. Yes, I'm here. Can we make this quick? We're doing speeches in a minute. This is about your son, sir. The nurse replied, firm but polite. Raymond Turner. He's been in a serious car accident. His condition is critical. A pause. Then, oh, that bad, yes. Another pause. Longer this time. Well, that's unfortunate, Marvin said. But you have to understand, I can't just leave. People flew in for this. Simon's debut is tonight. If I leave now, it'll ruin the mood. He's waited his whole life for this. I'm sure Raymond would understand, he added, almost as an afterthought. Ellen met my eyes, her mouth a hard line. I understand, I whispered, voice hollow. The nurse picked up the phone and hung up without another word. No one said anything for a while, just the soft beeping of machines, the distant murmur of other patients, and the hum of fluorescent lights. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even surprised. I just lay there, numb, staring at nothing. Ellen adjusted the blanket over my chest. He knew you were in critical condition, she said softly. Yeah, I replied. He just didn't care. And that was it. That was the moment the last thread snapped, the tiny, fragile belief that somehow, beneath all the theater and manipulation, Marvin might still be a father. He wasn't. He never had been. And I was done pretending otherwise. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Machines clicked and whirred around me like background noise from a sci-fi movie. I stared at the ceiling, trying not to move. Every twitch in my ribs sent pain searing through my chest. Even blinking hurt. But it was nothing compared to the weight in my gut. He knew. Marvin knew I was barely alive, and he stayed for the party. I kept replaying it in my head. His voice, casual and dismissive. Simon's debut is tonight. He's waited his whole life for this. Like I was the interruption, the inconvenience. Ellen had dimmed the lights before stepping out, said she'd be back to check vitals in an hour. Until then, it was just me, the dark, and the soft glow of monitors beside my bed. And the memories. They came in waves, moments I hadn't thought about in years. Me at 12, spending my weekend fixing a clogged kitchen sink because Marvin didn't want to waste money on a plumber. Simon at 15, getting a brand new keyboard from Marvin, while I got a used hoodie with the tags still attached. My high school graduation, Marvin skipping it for a matinee performance. Raymond, it's just high school. Let's not be melodramatic. And I believed him, every damn time. When Marvin promised to pay me back for covering the roof repair. When he said Simon would make it big any day now, so of course I should help him with rent. When he called me the rock of the family right before asking for another transfer. What a joke. At some point in the night, I started crying. Not loud. Just tears sliding sideways into the pillow as I stared at the ceiling, barely breathing. It wasn't sadness, not really. It was grief for the years I'd lost chasing something that never existed. I wasn't a son. I was a fallback plan. That truth hit me harder than the guardrail ever did. I don't know how long I lay like that before Ellen came back. She saw my face and didn't say anything, just walked over and set a cup of water on the tray beside me. You want to write anything down? She asked gently. Might help. Sometimes it clears the fog. I nodded. She handed me a notepad and a pen, adjusting the tray table over my lap. It took effort to hold the pen steady, but I managed. My hands still remembered how to draft, how to make lines mean something. I wrote one word at the top, Caleb, then below it, call him. Caleb was the only person who ever saw Marvin the way I did. My old dorm mate, the one who called Marvin an off-Broadway narcissist with a wallet fetish. The guy who laughed in Marvin's face when he said I was too rigid to understand art. The only person who ever told me You don't owe them your life, man. You're not a vending machine. I picked up the hospital phone and dialed his number from memory. It rang twice. Ray, his voice, sleepy and confused. I took a shaky breath. I need to disappear, I said. He didn't hesitate. Tell me where you are. I'm coming. Caleb arrived the next afternoon, just as a tech was wheeling me in for scans. I spotted him in the hallway, that same crooked smirk he wore in college still hanging on his face. He was older now, gray in his beard, heavier in the shoulders, but the look in his eyes hadn't changed. Sharp, focused, unapologetic. Raymond Turner, he said, walking into the room like he owned it. I leave you alone for a few years and you decide to reenact a Volvo commercial in real life? Bad lighting, I croaked, managing a half smile. Terrible production values. He pulled a chair next to the bed, then leaned in and lowered his voice. You were right to call me. We're gonna fix this. I nodded slowly. I need out, Caleb. Not just from the hospital. From all of it. The strings. The names on the bills. The guilt. I need an exit plan. He nodded like he'd already anticipated every word. I brought help. A few hours later, Miss Cho showed up, petite, sharp suit, a folder already in hand. I specialize in cutting ties, she said, flipping it open. You've given me plenty to work with. She laid out everything like a blueprint. Financial separation, revocation of shared access, legal documents to update his emergency contact, power of attorney, and the will. You're leaving assets to anyone? She asked. I thought about it. Thought about Marvin, about Simon. Then thought of Nurse Ellen, quietly changing my dressings at 3 a.m. Thought of Caleb, sitting in this room all afternoon without checking his phone once. No, I said. Not yet. Miss Cho raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. I'll prep everything, she said, standing. You sign when you're ready. And Raymond, once it's filed, there's no going back. Good, I said. I'm counting on that. The hospital fought us, of course. Tried to talk me out of leaving. You could still crash, the doctor warned. Your injuries are serious. Not as serious as staying, I replied. With Miss Cho handling the paperwork and Caleb wheeling me out, I left the hospital against medical advice. No fanfare, no family, just the beep of a closing elevator and the hum of fluorescent lights one last time. Caleb drove. Miss Cho followed in her car. I leaned against the window, bandages tight, every bump on the road vibrating up my spine. You sure you want to do it this way? Caleb asked at a red light. We could have waited for a wheelchair transport. Something more official. No, I muttered. I want them to show up and find me gone. And they did. Because before we left, I made sure to leave something behind. A letter, tucked neatly into a folder, addressed to Marvin and Simon, written by hand. It was clinical, precise. No rage, no rant, just facts. Itemized accounts of every dollar I'd given. Details of every loan, every bailout, every emergency I'd funded. Quotes, direct quotes, from text messages and emails where they promised to pay me back, or thanked me profusely before asking for more. And at the end, just one line. I won't be your understudy anymore. The performance is over. I signed it, folded it clean, and asked Ellen to deliver it. And then we were gone. Burned and bruised. Yes, but free. They showed up at the hospital the next morning, expecting a performance. Marvin in his tailored blazer, Simon in that ridiculous scarf he wore like a director's lanyard. They walked in slow, rehearsed steps, ready to play the part of worried family. But the hospital room was empty. The bed was stripped, the monitors off, the silence deafening. Excuse me, Marvin said to the nurse at the station. We're here for Raymond Turner. His condition was critical. The nurse, Ellen, of course, didn't flinch. She just looked up, checked her chart, and said evenly, he checked himself out yesterday. Against medical advice. Simon blinked. You let him leave? He was barely alive. He had legal counsel, she replied, and full capacity to make decisions. Marvin leaned in, voice dropping. This is outrageous. He's not well. We're his family. Ellen nodded slowly. He asked for both of you. Repeatedly. The night of the crash, the following morning. I called your listed number. You answered from what sounded like a party. Marvin's face tightened. That's irrelevant. No, she said. It's documented. She handed over a plain white envelope with their names on it. He left this for you. They took it like it might explode. Marvin opened it with a showman's caution, while Simon hovered over his shoulder. Inside was the letter, neatly typed, no frills, no drama. It started with a spreadsheet. Line by line, Raymond had detailed every financial interaction over the past 15 years. Roof repairs, tuition for Simon's intensive in Montreal, the venue rental, the fog machine upgrades, the cash envelopes, Marvin's dental work, Simon's rent twice, then the notes, all cross-referenced with dates and messages. This will be the last time, I swear. Marvin, 2014. Dad says you're the only one who gets things done. Simon, 2016. Just a small favor to keep the dream alive. Marvin, 2019. Simon snorted, trying to cover the flicker of panic. He's being dramatic. Marvin skimmed faster, until he reached the final paragraph. You told me I was the anchor of the family, but anchors only work if they're tied to something solid. You used me to keep yourselves afloat while weighing me down in the process. I won't drown for you anymore. This letter is not a goodbye. It's a record, one you'll need when the calls stop, when the transfers vanish, when the lights flicker and the phone rings and it's not me. I'll be gone, but the debt remains emotional and otherwise. You always said Simon was the star. Congratulations. The stage is all yours. Marvin's mouth hung open. Simon took the envelope and stared at it like it was a verdict. I can't believe he, Marvin began, but Ellen interrupted. One more thing, she said. He asked me to tell you this, if you showed up. They both looked up. He waited, she said, all night, just in case. She didn't wait for their response. She turned back to her paperwork. And Marvin, once a man who commanded the room with a monologue, had nothing left to say. Caleb called me 2 days later, voice low but buzzing with satisfaction. I was sitting propped up on the futon in his spare bedroom, my temporary haven, while Miss Cho dotted every legal I. The city buzzed just outside his apartment, but in here, everything felt still. They're spiraling, he said. Thought you might want to hear some of the fallout. I didn't respond right away, just waited. He took that as a yes. First off, Gala community's talking. Apparently, word's gotten around that Marvin bailed on his son's hospital bedside to clink glasses with retired lighting designers. Someone leaked the nurse's side of the story. A few theater blogs picked it up. I closed my eyes, imagining Marvin pacing his living room, rehearsing explanations. It was a misunderstanding, or the boy insisted I go on. But Caleb wasn't done. Finances are crashing too. You weren't just the emotional janitor in that family, Ray, you were the ATM. Marvin's credit card got declined at a dinner 2 nights ago. Simon tried to cover it, but his own card bounced. That made me pause. Simon had a card? Of course, with your name on the account. Miss Cho canceled it yesterday. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Simon posted one of those vague inspirational stories on Instagram. Caleb went on. Sometimes the people you trust the most betray you hardest. Comments are brutal. Someone replied with, you mean like siphoning from your brother? That post disappeared in under an hour. I imagined Simon sitting in some overpriced cafe, pouting at his phone, watching his follower count drop. The boy who once directed a one-act play called Legacy of Flame now being quietly torched by his own. And Marvin? I asked. Caleb gave a dark chuckle. Teaching community drama workshops again. He tried to pitch a memoir idea to a small press. They passed. That figured. What really did it, Caleb added, was Aunt Ruth. My eyebrows went up. She's still around? Oh, very much. And apparently very pissed. She's the one who's been telling people what went down in the hospital. She visited you the week you were still unconscious. Ellen remembers her. I guess she knew more than she let on. That surprised me. Aunt Ruth had always been quiet at family dinners, the kind of woman who brought homemade pie and left before dessert. But maybe she'd been watching all along, just waiting for someone else to finally stand up to the circus. She's the reason half their friends are pulling back, Caleb said. Not publicly, but enough. No more fundraising dinners. No more patron of the arts status. And Simon's directing gigs? I asked. Dried up, fast. Turns out, his clout was glued together with your bank transfers. Theater friends started whispering about how the gala wasn't really about Marvin's retirement. It was a launch party for Simon. Once people saw the letter, it all clicked. Good. Let it click. And attempts to spin it? I asked. Caleb scoffed. They tried. Marvin gave some melodramatic interview to a local arts podcast. Said you were emotionally unstable. Claimed the hospital exaggerated. But Ellen and Miss Cho had receipts. Literal ones. I let that sink in. Years of quiet sacrifice, years of being overlooked and drained and manipulated. And now, finally, it was public. Not in a screaming match, not in some messy outburst, but in facts, in cold, undeniable truth. They weren't villains in a tragic play, just users caught in the spotlight. What now? I asked. For them, Caleb said. They'll scramble. Simon will probably try crowdfunding some new vision. Marvin will hawk sign playbills on eBay. But the illusion's broken, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it, not even a little. Let the foundations crack. I was done being the mortar. The walls in Caleb's spare bedroom were a soft beige, the kind that didn't try to impress anyone. No trophies, no theatrical masks, just sunlight in the morning and quiet at night. Perfect. It had been 3 weeks since I left the hospital. The bruises on my ribs were still deep purple. My hip still throbbed every time I stood up too fast, but it was healing. I was healing, slowly, in pieces. Caleb had insisted I stay as long as I needed. No deadlines, no pressure. He moved his work desk to the kitchen so I could use the bedroom in peace. Every morning, he made coffee, real coffee, not the hospital sludge I'd grown used to. He didn't ask questions. He didn't bring up Marvin or Simon unless I did. Miss Cho stopped by once a week, usually with a folder and a look that said, I don't care how tired you are, sign here. She was efficient, ruthless in the best way. She'd already closed every joint account, rerouted my emergency contacts, scrubbed my name off any shared insurance policies. Your digital footprint is shrinking, she said one afternoon. In a month, Marvin Turner won't be able to prove you ever existed. I nodded. Good. She paused at the door. Most people hesitate. They leave a window open. Not this time. The days bled together in a quiet rhythm. I read, slept, sketched on an old pad Caleb had lying around. I hadn't drawn for myself in years. Back when I was a teenager, I used to design dream engines, machines that could run without noise, without heat. I drew one again, not for a patent, just for me. One night, I watched Cool Hand Luke on Caleb's ancient DVD player. I'd forgotten how much I liked old movies. Ones that didn't need explosions or big speeches to tell you someone was cracking. I went to therapy, too. Caleb's suggestion. At first, I resisted. I didn't think I had the energy to unpack decades of emotional debt. But the therapist, Jules, was calm, blunt, and nothing like Marvin. She didn't perform. She listened. You were trying to buy safety, she told me during our second session. That's what people-pleasing really is. Paying for silence, for space, for peace. I nodded. That hit too close to home. And now? She asked. Now, I said. I'm just trying to figure out who I am when no one's draining me. She smiled at that. That's the good kind of scary. Bit by bit, I started to breathe without tension. I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. Because now, there were no calls from Marvin. No texts from Simon. Just new numbers. New names. Nurse Ellen even sent a postcard. Just a cartoon cat and a sticky note. Still cheering for you. People started coming into my life who didn't need anything from me. Caleb introduced me to a couple of his friends. Normal people who didn't care what I used to pay for, or who my father was. One evening, a woman named Lily sat next to me at dinner. Quiet, observant. She laughed at my bad puns and didn't ask what I did for a living until dessert. When I said I used to be a mechanical engineer, she smiled and said, "Used to? Sounds like you're building something else now." And maybe I was. Not a machine, not a family, just a life. One I chose. 2 years later, I live in a town most people haven't heard of until they drive through it on the way to someplace flashier. It's the kind of place with 2 diners, 1 stubborn post office, and hills that go gold in late August. I rent a small house at the edge of town. It's got creaky floors, a window that sticks when it rains, and a front porch that sees the sunrise before I do. And I'm happy here. I work as a consultant now, freelance. Mostly eco-engineering projects, small but purposeful, things that matter to the people who use them. Caleb helped me land my first gig after the hospital. From there, it grew naturally. No big titles, no corner office, but it pays enough. More importantly, I don't have to answer to anyone who thinks I owe them the world just for existing. Miss Cho checks in quarterly. The last time we talked, she said, no legal activity traced back to Marvin or Simon in over a year. Good, I said. Let them stay ghosts. We filed the final cease and desist last spring. Marvin had tried to poke the boundary, sent a thinly veiled message through a former colleague of mine. Something about how family ties aren't so easily severed. Miss Cho made sure they were. My will is updated. My emergency contacts are new. My accounts are secure. It's over. I still see Caleb once a week. We get coffee or just sit in his living room watching bad documentaries and arguing about who actually built the Hoover Dam. He never treated me like I was broken. That's probably what helped the most. He just made space until I remembered how to exist in it. And then there's Lily. We met through one of Caleb's friends. Slowly, the way real things often start. She teaches at a local elementary school. Nothing about her demands attention, but everything about her keeps mine. She's gentle in ways that don't feel performative, and observant in ways that sometimes scare me. The first time I told her about Marvin, I braced myself for pity. Instead, she said, "You learned to survive someone who only knew how to perform love. That takes strength." I didn't know what to say, so I just said, "Thank you. We're not rushing anything. We go for long walks, talk about things like books and bread recipes, and how quiet used to scare me, but now, I crave it." Last week, I watched the sun rise while Lily slept beside me. For a while, I just sat on the edge of the bed and let it hit me. This life, this moment, this air I didn't have to earn. It felt honest. Sometimes I think about the boy I used to be, the one who stayed late at work, who kept saying yes, who just wanted his father to be proud. I grieve for him, but I don't want him back. He got me this far, but he doesn't need to carry the weight anymore. Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shows up when the monitor beeps at 2 a.m. It's who drives 6 hours without asking. It's who listens when you say you're done and believes you. And me? I'm not broken. I'm not bitter. I'm free. And that's more than an ending. That's a beginning.